3 weeks. That's all it took. 3 weeks ago, gun owners across America celebrated what felt like a historic victory when the NFA tax finally dropped to zero. No more $200 government fee just to exercise your constitutional rights. People rushed to file their paperwork, ordered suppressors they'd been eyeing for years, and finally felt like the system was working in their favor. And then Senator Chris Murphy filed Amendment 4159. What I'm about to break down for you isn't just another political talking point. This is a calculated financial trap designed to catch hundreds of thousands of Americans who filed paperwork in good faith, and the numbers involved are going to make your jaw drop. We're talking about a tax so extreme that it would make a $600 suppressor cost over $5,000. But here's what nobody else is telling you. There's a hidden mechanism in this amendment that could affect gun owners who don't even own NFA items yet. Let me walk you through exactly how this works. The amendment breakdown, Senator Murphy's Amendment 4159, rewrites Section 5811 of the Internal Revenue Code, and the language couldn't be more direct. Every single NFA item transferred between parties would carry a $4,799 tax, not $200 like the old system. Nearly $5,000 per item. Think about what that means in practical terms. You want to buy a suppressor from your local dealer? That's $4,799 in tax alone before you even pay for the suppressor itself. Your father wants to pass down his registered short-barreled rifle that's been in the family for generations? Same tax. A collector adding 3 suppressors to their collection would face over $14,000 in federal taxes before touching the actual purchase price. But the amendment doesn't stop at transfers. It targets manufacturers directly by raising the making tax on suppressors, short-barreled rifles, and shotguns from $0 to $555 per unit. For machine guns and destructive devices, manufacturers would pay that full $4,799 for every single unit they produce. This creates what economists call a cascading effect. Manufacturers face higher costs, which get passed to distributors, which get passed to dealers, which ultimately land on consumers. A suppressor that currently costs $600 would suddenly cost over $5,300 with Murphy's tax included.
Today we need to talk about something that every American gun owner, every supporter of the Second Amendment, everybody, period, needs to fully understand.
This is insane. It is illogical and it makes no sense. There is no justification. It's absolutely crazy.
If you're going to restrict a constitutional right, it has to be consistent with the nation's historical traditions of firearm regulation.
But what he did in this particular bill, put an amendment in to change the NFA tax to $4,709. So
not every instrument that is bearable will be protected by the Second Amendment.
It said in part that gun regulations must be consistent with the historical tradition of firearms regulations in the U.S.
The inflation calculation. Now, where did this specific number come from? Murphy's team didn't pull $4,799 out of thin air. They calculated it by taking the original 1934 NFA tax of $200 and adjusting for inflation to 2025. Here's the historical context that makes this so troubling. In 1934, $200 wasn't just expensive, it was deliberately prohibitive. The average American worker earned around $1,600 per year during the Great Depression. That $200 tax represented 12.5% of an entire year's income. A Thompson submachine gun cost about $200 at the time, so the tax literally doubled the price and made ownership impossible for working-class Americans. The original NFA tax was designed from the start to price people out of their rights based on wealth. Adjusting that same discriminatory framework for inflation doesn't somehow make it legitimate. It just makes the discrimination more expensive. And here's something that should concern everyone. This inflation adjustment argument creates a dangerous precedent. If this passes, future increases could always be justified by pointing to inflation. The tax could theoretically grow every single year without any new legislation. The timing trap. The timing of this amendment reveals something deeply calculated, and this is where things get genuinely alarming for anyone who's filed NFA paperwork recently. Since January 1st, 2026, when the NFA tax dropped to zero, the ATF has been absolutely flooded with Form 1 and Form 4 applications. Form 1 is what you file to manufacture an NFA item yourself, like building a short-barreled rifle. Form 4 is what you file to transfer an NFA item from a dealer to yourself. Industry insiders estimate over 100,000 forms were submitted in just the first 2 weeks of January alone. This unprecedented surge completely overwhelmed the ATF's processing capacity. Normal processing times already run between 90 and 180 days, sometimes longer during high-volume periods. Here's where Murphy's timing becomes predatory. If this amendment somehow passed while all those applications are still sitting in the processing queue, the ATF could theoretically require applicants to pay the new $4,799 tax before approving their forms. You filed when the tax was zero. You budgeted based on zero. You already purchased your suppressor or parts. But if the law changes before your approval comes through, you might be stuck paying nearly $5,000 you never planned for, or withdrawing your application entirely and losing everything you've already invested. Tens of thousands of Americans could find themselves trapped between paying a massive unexpected tax or abandoning their applications completely.
A brand new Senate amendment that would bring the NFA tax back.
It's by Senator Chris Murphy. It wants to increase the NFA tax to $4,709.
You need to be on the right side of the law because the legal system is complex.
2 weeks ago, Congress told you that the NFA tax for suppressors, short-barrel firearms was dead, gone.
What I will tell you is that that tax will eventually be raised.
The weapons unto themselves, they're not the problem. The problem is, what are you doing with the weapons?
The processing bottleneck. Let's talk about the ATF's actual capacity to process these applications, because the math here is staggering. The ATF's NFA division has approximately 35 examiners responsible for processing every Form 1 and Form 4 submitted nationwide. With over 100,000 forms filed since January 1st, that works out to roughly 2,800 applications per examiner sitting in queue right now. Even if each examiner could process 20 applications per day, which is unrealistically fast given the required background checks and paperwork verification, it would take each examiner 143 working days to clear their current backlog. That's 7 months minimum, and that assumes 0 new applications come in during that time. Here's what most people don't realize. The ATF has discretion over processing speed. They can expedite certain applications or slow walk others based on administrative priorities. If Murphy's amendment gained traction and looked like it might actually pass, the ATF could simply stop processing applications entirely under the justification that they're waiting for clarity on what tax amount to collect. This would freeze tens of thousands of law-abiding Americans in limbo, unable to get their approvals, unable to withdraw without losing money, unable to do anything except wait.
This isn't about safety, it isn't about crime. It's about pricing everyday Americans out of their constitutional rights. It's happening right now.
There's a myriad of things that can tie you up legally, financially, put you in jail, or maybe get you in very serious trouble with the police.
Murphy's amendment would sharply raise the National Firearms Act tax that Congress just eliminated as part of the One Big Beautiful Bill.
What this bill does is it increases the transfer and purchase tax of those items to $4,709.
Reinstate some of the civil rights that Americans should have that have been taken from us by a tyrannical government.
Now that's an increase of more than 2,200% compared to the $200 tax that was on the books for almost a century.
The expanding definition problem. While Murphy pushes this amendment through Congress, there's another threat developing that could dramatically expand how many firearms fall under this proposed tax. The National Firearms Act currently covers 7 categories: machine guns, short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, suppressors, destructive devices, any other weapons, and weapons made from rifles or shotguns. But the ATF has been expanding these definitions incrementally through determination letters for years. Pistol braces are the perfect example. For nearly a decade, the ATF ruled that attaching a stabilizing brace to an AR-15 pistol did not convert it into a short-barreled rifle. Then in 2023, the ATF reversed course and declared that most pistol-braced firearms are actually short-barreled rifles requiring NFA registration. Millions of Americans suddenly found themselves in potential violation of federal law overnight. The ATF provided a registration amnesty period where owners could register without paying the tax, and over 250,000 people registered pistol-braced firearms during that window. Now consider what happens if Murphy's tax passes and the ATF announces another reinterpretation that brings more firearms under NFA regulation. Gun owners would face mandatory registration at $4,799 per firearm or federal felony charges.
What Senator Murphy's amendment would do directly in the text of the appropriations bill is to reverse that change and impose a massive tax.
The only possible reason for this law is that they hate you. Nothing else. No other explanation suffices.
Just brace yourself. This is going to happen. If you have items that you want, you need to get on those things while the tax is $0.
With gun control being implemented in a number of states, even where least expected, this is not a bill that gun owners should ignore.
Let's put it bluntly. It's a tax not designed to fund anything practical. It's a tax designed to prevent you and your lawful ownership.
The AR-15 pistol vulnerability. There's a specific category of firearms sitting right on the edge of NFA classification that should concern every AR-15 owner. Approximately 20 to 24 million AR-15 style rifles exist in civilian hands in the United States, and a significant portion are configured as pistols. AR-15s with barrels shorter than 16 inches, but without stocks, designed to be fired with 1 or 2 hands. These pistols are currently not classified as NFA items because they don't meet the definition of a rifle, which requires a stock. But that definition hinges on design intent and configuration, both of which the ATF can reinterpret through administrative rulemaking. If the ATF decided that any AR-15 pistol with a barrel under 16 inches and a weight over a certain threshold is actually designed to be fired from the shoulder, millions of these firearms would instantly require NFA registration. Under Murphy's proposed tax, an AR-15 pistol owner who paid $800 for their firearm would suddenly need to pay $4,799 to the federal government just to keep it legally. The alternative, 10 years in federal prison and a $250,000 fine for possessing an unregistered NFA firearm. The industry consolidation effect. The economic modeling behind Murphy's tax reveals something even more calculated. This isn't just about taxing gun owners. It's specifically designed to force small and medium-sized firearms manufacturers out of business. In 2024, the civilian suppressor market generated approximately $1.2 billion in revenue across roughly 80 manufacturers. The majority are small to medium-sized companies producing between 500 and 10,000 units annually, typically operating on profit margins of 15 to 25%. A company producing 2,000 suppressors per year might generate $1.2 million in revenue and $240,000 in profit. Now apply Murphy's $555 manufacturing tax per suppressor. That same company would owe over $1.1 million in federal taxes annually on $240,000 in profit. The math doesn't work. Small manufacturers would fold. Only large corporations with diversified product lines and massive production volumes could survive. This is industry consolidation through regulatory taxation. Make compliance so expensive that only mega corporations can afford it, then regulate those few remaining corporations more easily.
You absolutely need to get these items off the NFA while we still can. Again, we have basically until the midterms.
This is a punitive, burdensome attack, a tax that makes ownership financially impossible for the average citizen.
And Senator Chris Murphy, who is definitely top 10 worst senator right now in America.
Not having this Fourth Amendment to protect you and protect yourself from the police just entering your home without a warrant, that's pretty crazy.
If a tax is set at a level that nobody can afford to pay, it functions not as a tax, but a ban in all but the name.
The constitutional precedent. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Murphy's amendment isn't the tax itself. It's the legal precedent it establishes for taxing other constitutional rights at prohibitive levels. If Congress can impose a $4,799 tax on exercising your Second Amendment right, what prevents them from imposing similar taxes on other constitutional rights? The obvious answer is that poll taxes are explicitly unconstitutional under the 24th Amendment, and any tax designed to restrict fundamental rights would face legal challenges. But here's the problem. The Supreme Court has never definitively ruled that all taxes on Second Amendment rights are unconstitutional. The NFA tax has existed since 1934, and federal courts have historically upheld it. If Murphy's tax passed and survived legal challenges, it would establish precedent that Congress can impose financially prohibitive taxes on constitutional rights as long as they call it a tax rather than a ban. That precedent extends far beyond firearms and makes every other constitutional right vulnerable to the same taxation strategy. This amendment probably won't pass this time, but the blueprint is now in their playbook. ready to be deployed whenever the political winds shift. The framework exists, the calculations are done, the trap is designed. Stay vigilant, stay informed, and never assume your rights are safe just because you won a single battle. That's it for today, folks. See you in the next video.